All right. Welcome, everyone, to the recording and webinar on Inner Armor Core. For those of you who are new to Inner Armor, welcome. We're glad to have you. For those who don't know me, my name is John Wierenga. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Inner Armor, and I'm here today with my fellow co-founders of Inner Armor and our strategic partner, Royer Neuroscience. And we're happy to be here, and that's Dr. Timothy Royer and Amy Royer. So, Amy Royer, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone joining us today?
Awesome. I'm super happy to be joining today. My name's Amy Royer. I am a registered nurse. I practiced many years ago in pediatrics and then for years was home raising our kids. And then as they were off to school, I started working with Doc in Royer Neuroscience and really love the areas of wellness and nutrition. So I've done a little bit of self-educating in that space, and I love just working alongside of Doc and you, John, and seeing what you guys do with technology, where I can come alongside of it with a little bit of my medical background and team up for just optimizing myself first, but then also my loved ones and then our clients. So that's a little summary.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Great to have you. And you're too humble as always,
Yes.
introducing yourself. Like always, just Amy is the brain power behind so much of what we're going to go through today. And you're going to hear a lot more from Amy on why we breathe with our diaphragms, why it's important, and why it's so simple but effective. So thank you, Amy, so much. Doc, I guess that leaves you last to introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Dr. Royer. First of all, thanks for being on today or watching the video. We know that time is precious to all of us, and us taking this time, but you also taking the time means a lot. And we wouldn't use that time if we didn't feel like this is an extremely important topic to you personally, but also to um, the individuals that you work with, whether that's in business or in the athletic arena. This, I would say, is probably the most important topic in reflection of how the breathing has an upstream impact on everything that we're doing up to our brain. You know, our brain needs this energy that comes from breathing and that we're going to talk about as we go. So thanks for the time. I'm a neuropsychologist. Have been doing this for 35 years. First 10 years in clinical settings as a division chief at a pretty large pediatric hospital in Michigan, primarily working with the brain in brain injury, but also working as consultation to all different specialty services in a hospital in relation to how the brain functions. It's out of that work that really I got a vision to really help people understand, not just looking at their behaviors, but looking at their brain, especially for diagnostics, but also for treatment, that so many people miss looking at the brain and they just look at behaviors and treat those things. And so Amy and I have been committed to really, we're on a mission to try to rescue every brain that we can, because so many people are lost in the woods with how to really address their brain. And you only get one. You can't just go find one at Target. You only get one. And so you got to make sure it's working well your entire life. And we're committed to that. So glad to be with you guys as we get rolling on the core program.
Inner Armor is a peak performance company built off of really the giants that came before us in biofeedback and neurofeedback. And we work with high achievers and elite athletes all over the world to teach them these very basic mechanisms so they can be more aware and train their bodies to be the most efficient and performing for them the best when they're in stressful situations. So we talk about a lot of different things at Inner Armor. We talk about sleep, the brain, vision training, and how well our eyes are working to send information to our brains. But today we're going to talk about one key thing that is fundamental to a lot of other aspects of our performance. It's probably the most important thing that we do at Inner Armor. And it's core to who we are. And that's why we called the program Inner Armor Core. And that is breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, and the role that it plays for our performance, our recovery, our ability to regulate our autonomic nervous system. So, Doc, I'm going to hand it over to you to start and just talk about breathing in the role of performance and the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely. Right when John says breathing, there's probably a lot of you are like, oh, I got that. I don't need to listen to this. And you do need to listen to this, because even myself learned through the process of working with tens of thousands of brains that I was looking at other things and missing the most important thing, was how oxygen impacts our entire body. So I'm a neuropsychologist. I have all kinds of tools and imaging we use to study the brain and analyze the brain. And in the early 2000s, we started to use some technology that interfaces brain-computer interface, that interfaces the brain with computers, and you can actually adjust the computer functioning with the brain, and was doing some really good work with that. And it wasn't me, but somebody that I was getting the equipment from said, hey, are you using breathing too? And I'm like, yeah, everybody knows how to breathe. We all breathe, right? Just use a pacer. And he goes, no, try using use a breathing belt and see what happens. We started to see that our patients that we were working with on their brain, that they were improving twice as fast if we would just regulate their breath. I'm like, what the heck? Why is this making such a difference? And then had a couple particular patients with some severe levels of anxiety, and I didn't know where to start with them. I started with breathing, and we started to walk through these phobias and all kinds of stuff. And all I did was hone in on the breathing, and I just watched their lives transform from just absolute, almost disabled, to very high functioning people just off of the breathing. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Then in the peak performance space, I've done a lot of work with quarterbacks in the NFL. Currently, 11 of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL I've assessed or worked with. But back in the early 2000s, I had a quarterback come to me, Kirk Cousins, who's been in the NFL for a long time. And it was while he was at Michigan State, and having a tough start to his year. And he comes in and he says, Doc, I am not doing the greatest, and I have got to turn this thing around. We play Ohio State in 2 weeks, and I need to see if you can get me completely fixed in 2 weeks. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, what are you talking about? And he says, I've got to get working. So I looked at it and I said, you know what? I am going to aggressively work on just his diaphragmatic breathing, not just like watch an app or do some meditation. No, scientifically measure the oxygen intake, how the diaphragm's working, and then scientifically measure how the heart's responding to every single breath to create a pattern for him that would be perfect for his heart. Because all of us have a different breathing pattern, but it has to fall within certain limits. And I said, well, I gave it to him and I said, hey, I need you to run this 3 times a day. I'm like, there's no way this college kid's going to do this. Sure enough, he does it 3 times a day. His heart completely changed in 2 weeks. Brain changed in 2 weeks. And he went out, and at the shoe, they killed Ohio State and proceeded to go on and have one of the best Big Ten runs of their season. And the rest is history. He ends up getting drafted. But if I was going to take that all back, and Kirk would tell you the same thing if you watch his videos on our website, he would say it went back to those first 2 weeks of breathing, right? So breathing is essential. So let's talk about that, okay? So your brain needs this oxygen in your body. 90% of what's going on in your energy and how you're making energy comes from oxygen. But we have a choice in this, is how I'm going to bring in the oxygen. I'm either going to bring it in very consistently and in a certain rhythm, which we're going to talk about as we go, that then creates a cascade effect for the heart, the brain, the rest of the body, that optimizes the nervous system. Or I'm just going to be sloppy with the breathing, use my chest, not be consistent. And the heart doesn't just sit back and say, cool, you're lazy today with your breathing. No, the heart still has to oxygenate the blood, so it has to work harder. The moment it does that, then the whole system gets out of balance. So when we're talking about core, we're talking about scientific, specific to you breathing. This is not an app where you just follow, the one pacer at a certain pace for everybody. Everybody's different to find that exact rhythm that fits you and optimizes your nervous system.
Awesome. Doc, talk a little bit more. Well, Amy, actually, why don't you talk a little bit more about why the breath is so important to the heart? Like, what is going on there when we think about the interaction between the breath and the heart? And maybe touch on, if you can, a little bit the nervous system, right? We don't want to go too technical, but if you could, a little bit of what's going on in our bodies when we're talking about diaphragmatic breathing.
Okay. I would probably try to divide that into two things. The first one just being the anatomical changes that you want to see happening with the deep diaphragmatic breathing. So we have this almost like a platform muscle that separates where our lung space is and where our abdominal cavity is. And it's called the diaphragm. Like an unbelievably cool muscle. It looks like nothing else you see in the body. But this thing is going from the time you draw your first breath until your last breath. And it's so unique how it works, but it sort of sits like a little bit of a dome. And when you push your belly out, that dome goes downward, and that makes a bunch more space for your lungs to expand. And that's the very first thing that we want from a deep diaphragmatic breath. We want to see that dome shape go flat in the diaphragm, and that will pull oxygen into our lungs. So it's kind of crazy because we think that we have to be like air in, but it's actually created by the dropping of that diaphragm muscle, makes a negative pressure space and draws air into our lungs. Then when we go to exhale, we pull our belly in, which allows that diaphragm to go back up into that dome shape. And it physically pushes the carbon dioxide and the toxins out of our lungs for us. So it's a very powerful system, both the inhale and the exhale. But if we're lazy on it, we're getting like a very low return on investment. So if you're not moving those abdominal muscles, you're not fully filling your lungs. You're not getting the optimal oxygenation of the blood. So it's interesting because it's all automated. It's run by the autonomic nervous system. But we, especially in our American culture, tend to get a little lazy on how we're doing our breathing. And it's kind of sad, but when babies are born, they breathe diaphragmatically. But as we grow and become stressed little creatures in our culture, we resort to chest breathing, which is really ineffective because your lungs are encaged in the rib cage. And so there's a limited amount of space for expansion. So the only real area to open up the expansion is out the bottom where that diaphragmatic muscle is. So we really need to move that muscle. And then that optimizes the lung space, which then is super fun. Related to surface area where the gas exchanges, a lazy breath could give us the amount of square surface area of a ping pong table within our lungs, whereas a good deep diaphragmatic breath could give us the surface area of a pickleball court for somebody who's my size, or even a tennis court for a larger NBA basketball player. So the crazy thing is that control of that resides in my choice to breathe well. Like, how powerful is that? Like, we work with some pretty powerful people who run corporations and do all these things, but I can look at a third grader and tell them, you have more power in your next choice to take a deep belly breath because it's going to set everything else up. So that's the first half of the breathing. The second half is something we never even knew about when we started working with the brain. Your deep breathing, when you use those muscles and you move that diaphragmatic muscle, you are massaging the vagus nerve and you are getting vagus nerve involvement. And nowadays, many people do know about the vagus nerve, that this is this magical nerve that helps move us into a state of more relaxation. You can read books about how to engage the vagus nerve, but guess what? You can engage the vagus nerve every time you take a deep diaphragmatic breath. What we used to think was that this nerve, which they call the wandering nerve, it starts up in your brain and goes throughout your body. It's unbelievable, super involved in your digestion, but also everywhere in your body, and sends off the message to go into the more calming, focused state. Well, guess what? They found out that for every strand of that nerve that goes from the brain to the body, there's 9 more that go the opposite direction. So it's called efferent and afferent. And we never knew it was bidirectional at the beginning. Then we thought it was like 50-50. And now we know the majority of the information is coming from actually our body up to our brain. And then our brain makes a calculation and sends off one big message back down to the body. So you have so much power in every breath. And when we isolate the breathing to the belly movement with your program, that's the space where we guarantee that we're engaging that diaphragm muscle. Elsewhere, you can do really good work with slower breathing and meditation. And I don't want to throw that under the carpet or whatever. But what we're doing when we use the belt and watch the breathing, we're making sure that we're not allowing the biomechanics to be that compensatory chest breathing, but we're forcing the biomechanics into that engagement of all those abdominal muscles, but specifically the diaphragm muscle.
Awesome. So just to recap, make sure I understand, Amy. So when we breathe with our chest and we're breathing shallow breaths from our chest, we're not getting the full capacity or using the full capacity of our lungs. Is that correct? We're leaving
Exactly.
some of that on the table. And tell me one more time again about the vagus nerve. Like, the vagus nerve is the nerve that's sending those signals to the brain, right? So how does that, by engaging the vagus nerve, how does that have an influence when I'm like in more of a stress state? Why would I want to engage the vagus nerve through diaphragmatic breathing?
The vagus nerve will send the messages to the brain that will then speak to the heart rate. So
Mm,
when anybody speaks to heart rate variability or coherence training, it's all a result of engaging the vagus nerves. You can't do that kind of training without the communication of the vagus nerve. It's like a cell phone call. You can't connect without it. And what's so cool is that a deep breath physically massages that nerve. It's crazy. But if we're breathing in our chest, we're not impacting the vagus nerve. We're still moving oxygen. And if you ever see somebody who is compromised, respiratory compromised, like whether it's emphysema or COVID or something, you just see the difficulty of getting enough air when you're only able to use a limited part of your lungs. And then you see somebody who knows how to do the deep breathing, and you're like, that is not even the same two things at all. The one is survival, and the other one is thrival. Is like, man, you can see when that person is engaging in the diaphragmatic breathing that it is like pumping gas into a tank. Like they're going to go and go and go with that kind of breathing.
that's awesome. I want to talk a little bit, and maybe for both you, Doc, and Amy. I think everyone on this call today, and probably everyone who listens to this at some point in the future, knows that breath work, meditation, these types of practices have a long history, hundreds of years, centuries of practice of showing that they can help you get in a more calm, focused state, right? So I think we can kind of say the level of playing field is there, the research is there, but also just the qualitative, feedback is there from people. But not many people practice meditation. They don't practice breath work. And I want to talk a little bit though about like why breathing, right? And our specific breathing that we recommend at Inner Armor is going to also have a similar calming and balancing effect on the nervous system. And I want to try to, for our listeners, connect why diaphragmatic breathing may be different than a meditative breath or other breathwork practices like Wim Hof or things like that that people have heard. Maybe they've practiced before. But why is the Inner Armor breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, unique? And how is that going to set them up for success if they practice that?
I think my first response to that would be just the data, because we can go in a room and we can all like turn on a music or repeat a chant, and we can breathe at the same rate. But we do not know what changes happened within our body at the end of those 20 minutes if we don't have any data. So, I've seen people who say, I've been practicing meditation and it's just, I don't know if it's making a difference. What's different about what we're doing at Inner Armor is we're measuring. So I just call it guided meditation because I honestly support meditation practices. But when you're looking at optimization and you're looking at, I know we are an optimization company, but many of our clients are coming from a clinical perspective and trying actually to heal and get better. You need data points. And so that's where we are definitely different. And with the core program that we're going to talk about today, we're basically saying we're going to guarantee that you're going to do diaphragmatic breathing. We won't be engaging in spending time doing chest breathing or some adaptation of breathing. The body's so smart. It's going to figure out the straightest line between 2 points. So if it can get away with some shallow chest breathing, it's going to default to that. But we're not in that space. We're in optimization space. We don't want the default mode. We want the optimal mode. So when I do the training, the core breathing training with my belt on, honestly, I love to look at that screen and see and know that I am using my diaphragm muscle and I am engaging that vagus nerve.
Awesome. Yeah, the
Yeah,
data, doc. Yeah,
yeah, the data is so important. Like when we do an assessment, I cannot tell you how many times I've hooked somebody up to the breathing belt and they tell me I meditate every day and I do my yoga and I do this and that. And I put the belt on them and we're not getting any diaphragm. They're breathing slow, but they're breathing from their chest. Or I had this guy a while back who very successful, wealthy gentleman. And he's like, I got all that stuff down. I've been to the best in the world, this yogi here and there. And I'm like, okay. So I put him on and he's literally breathing backwards. Like when he's inhaling, his stomach is going in. And when he's exhaling, his stomach's going out. And it's totally backwards. And I can see it on the belt because I'm getting feedback. And I'm like, hey, man, that's not. And I'm watching his heart because we can watch his heart. And his heart's going all over the place. I'm like, what are you doing? Well, and we sat there and he argued with me. This was actually a couple of years ago now, argued with me about like, this is the way you're supposed to read. And I said, okay, how about if we switch that over? We switched it over, took about 3 or 4 months, completely transformative for him. But he didn't know without the feedback. And that is really at the crux of why we're spending time on this. Do we all agree that breathing is great? Yes. Do we think mindfulness is good? Yes, it's good. Yoga is good. The problem is that it's not measuring anything. And you could be completely doing the wrong thing. There's a great study out in California where they looked at people with dementia and they looked at 2 groups. They looked at mindful, slow breathing without any tech, just mindful, slow breathing. And then they looked at this oscillating diaphragmatic breathing with this group. And statistically significant changes in the biomarkers for dementia happened with that oscillating, measured breathing. The mindfulness people who were just lowering their heart rate, they weren't kicking in the heart and the other systems in the body and the brain like we want to get the vagus nerve to do its thing because there wasn't really any data around it. I kind of liken it to this, okay? Is we all, when we drive, we see road signs that tell us how fast we need to go, right? And we know if we don't follow those signs, there's consequences for that, right? And so we would all agree that this is the speed limit, it's 70 miles an hour, right? The problem is I can agree with that and understand that, but if I don't have a speedometer in my car, I can't interface with what whoever thought of what the speed limit is, what that needs to be, right? So the speed limit's good. Do we all need to breathe? Yes. And is a certain rate good? Yes. But if I don't have a speedometer, a biometric device, I'm just guessing. And what I find, and I've been doing this a long time, is most people are guessing wrong. I'm talking about elite athletes. I had an NFL coach that I worked with about 3 days ago, belt on, and hey, I got this down. And I'm like, you're not even close, bro. Like we have to switch that because look at what your heart's doing because of that. Look at your brain because of that. Look at your hypothalamus. Look at all the different things in your body, right? And brain. And then I said, let's change it. Belt, timing, consistency, exactly to what fit him. All of a sudden, heart changes, gets into this perfect zone flow state. Brain changes. Boom. Skin temperature changes. Skin conductance, the same thing you use in a polygraph, which picks up distractibility and poor focus, immediately changes. But he didn't know. He knew the idea, but he didn't have a speedometer. And this is the totally unique thing about core. It is the speedometer. We all agree breathing's good. But the crucial thing is that it is the speedometer that lets you get in that speed. The concept is great, but many people are missing the mark.
Yeah, or they don't know where to start.
Yes.
They are downloading the app to do the meditation, and they're doing the discipline. They're doing the hard work. They're spending the time every day practicing, but it's almost like they need the feedback at the beginning so that time is being spent in the most effective way. I had a coach last week I was talking to. He said, "Oh yeah, we do breathing. I do breathing with my team before we go on the soccer field. We've been doing that, before every game." I said, "Great. How do you know it's creating the effect in the bodies and the brains of the players that you want?" He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, if you're not breathing correctly, you're not going to get the focused, calm, ready zone state that you think you're getting." Right? And psychologically, if you can think that, yeah, that's placebo, that's a little bit helpful, but we don't play in that game. We are a measured company where we want to teach you how to get into that state physiologically and so that you're ready to go. And it doesn't take long. We're going to talk about how we can do that, and we're going to show you guys how it's possible. But I think that's the key thing for everyone to take away is that this is measured mindfulness. This is the speedometer. This is biofeedback to give you that feedback to help accelerate your learning journey and becoming a more effective breather and improving your performance. So let's see. I think there's a couple different things that I want to talk to about before we get to the program, but I do want to walk through the program. It doesn't look like we have any questions yet coming in. Oh, we have one question. You guys want to take a question here before we go?
Yes, I am 5'7". I know I look 6'2", but I am 5'7". Is that what the question? How tall is this guy?
No, actually, I'm getting a different question from someone saying, "I am an athlete, a Division I athlete, and I want to know how I could best utilize this breathing training and how that would help me as a Division I student athlete."
Hey, you want to go or me?
Okay. Well, my answer would be this. I often think about the breathing as the infinity loop, that figure eight. And as an athlete, you're really thinking about one side of that figure eight, the performance side, the physical body. You want to be strong, you want to be agile, you want to have a quick response time, you want, all these physical things to be peak. But there's the other side of the infinity loop that powers all of that. And that's the breathing side. So you got to get the right breathing that empowers the other side of that infinity loop. And then it can go back and forth. And then you may not have even been thinking about this, but this also empowers all your recovery. Because typically in athletics, we're always thinking about the performance and the numbers and turning in all of that outcome stuff. But everything behind the outcome stuff is related to your recovery, which is all powered by the breathing as well. So either think of it in the figure eight, where you have to get that oxygen in order for your body to have the benefits of it. And then you are constantly going back and forth with that figure eight, or you want to think about it as upstream and downstream. You're looking for all these downstream markers, free throw percentage, 3-point whatever percentage, things like that. but really like what powers all of that from the get-go. Like you do have to go all the way back to the nitty-gritty, and it's getting the oxygen in to be able to send that to all your mitochondria throughout your body and your brain. Don't forget your brain, in order to empower this performance. So I'm hoping that connects in either one of those ways, the upstream, downstream, or the infinity loop. It's entirely connected.
Yeah, I would add a couple things. I mean, that's exactly right. Physiologically, how it's all connected is you have to understand to do your craft, whatever that sport is, that requires energy, right? And if we really just do the math on energy, food is important, water is important, sleep is important, all the things the nutritional person is telling you is important. But 90%, 85 to 90%, that's a lot of your energy comes from oxygen. Think how long you can go without some of these things, but you can't go very long without oxygen. So that just in alone statistically, and I'm a big data person, says, wait a minute, how much time am I focusing on this? And yet I'm over here on these micronutrients and this and that. I need to be like getting this thing perfect. And so with my pro athletes, I've been doing this for a long time, and collegiate athletes and high school athletes, it's all about the breathing. From the time you wake up through the entire day up to your event, and then when you're done, and that's kind of the biggest thing. Like we did a lot of work in the NBA where for a couple NBA teams at the end of the game, they would go to the locker and their breathing belt would be at the locker. And why was that? Because they got to start getting ready for the next game. And they've got all this adrenaline, all this inflammation, all these things going on. The number one thing to fight all that is oxygen, correct oxygen. So we would have them breathing immediately to improve their sleep cycles and all that. And then I'll see these players that will teach them, they'll put the belt on while they're putting, while they're shooting free throws. Okay. And we'll actually have the belt connected to music, and the music will only play when they're breathing correctly while they're shooting free throws or while they're putting. The music stops the moment they're not breathing correctly, because we know how important that is. And then when you get really good with the breath, and it gets really good, you start to interface it into your actual skill. Like, I don't want you putting the ball on an inhale, because that's when the heart is stressed. Once it gets all the oxygen, the heart relaxes, and so does body, and the pupils change and everything. Is I want you to putt on the exhale. I want you to release your free throw on the exhale. And that I can't do that if I haven't learned the biomechanics. I want to hit my serve on the exhale, because that's the point of action. And you can't get to that point of action where you can actually use it and leverage it in sport if you don't learn the biomechanics of it.
Awesome. Thank you guys, and thank you, Derek, for your question. You also had another question, Derek, around some collaboration, so I'll follow up with you after that. Great stuff. So I think it's we're 35, 40 minutes in. I think it's a good time now to kind of show Inner Armor Core the product. So Doc, I know you're going to share your screen and open up the app, and we're going to talk through this program and why we've designed it the way we have to help you guys become the best at this skill, diaphragmatic breathing, and learn the biomechanics, and then eventually be able to practice this skill anywhere you're at without the equipment. Our goal is not that you are doing this program for the rest of your life. This is a targeted program that you're going to come in, learn the skill, and then apply it. So let's talk through that. Doc, do you want to pull open the Inner Armor app and share your screen? Perfect. And I'll ask Amy maybe to talk through the first level. And maybe while Doc's pulling up, Amy, you can talk through the biomechanics level and what are the two skills that we're going to first teach all of our users.
Perfect. So one of the things I love about this program is the simplicity of it. At the same time, I don't want anybody to lose the complexity of it, because it powers everything else downstream. But the simplicity is so fantastic, because when I look at this training program, I can think of no one that this could not be good for. I can see telling a third grader how to do this. And I just yesterday was telling an 80-year-old how to do this. So the application is, I mean, to me, it's universal. And of course, I'm coming from a space where I'm actually using it. And so I'm speaking from that experience as well. So if that goes in the core program, where we begin is with the biomechanics. I'm waiting for it to pop up on the screen. There we go. So the biomechanics is basically, we would like to assure that you are moving your belly when you're breathing. So you put the belt on. We put the belt on the same way every single time Doc's putting it on. You want it to be snug and you want it to be around the level of your belly button, which is really nice to know because all of us are built differently, but we all have a belly button. So it's really nice to be able to work off of a marker like that. And then the belt will then connect with the Bluetooth on your device and you will be ready to train. So when you are training in the biomechanics stage, we're trying to get you to be familiar and comfortable with breathing between 3 and 7 breaths per minute. So we give you a scale there of those 2-bar scales on your right that we're going to try to get between 3 and 7. So Doc is doing it live for you right now, and you can see his rate, breaths per minute, and he is between the 3 and 7. So during the time that he stays between 3 and 7, he will be scoring points. And for those of us who like points, this is the exciting part, is that we're going to try to earn 1,000 points in the next couple of minutes. So we're going to let Doc keep going with this. What's you're seeing as somebody who's been trained in this department, when we begin training with people, we often see just a lot of crazy movement there on the red line on the left side of the screen. And we just start super easy. We just start with, hey, let's not even think about breathing. Let's just push our belly out, pull our belly in, push our belly out, pull our belly in. And it's so interesting because you don't actually have to think about inhale, exhale. Your body will take care of that for you. You just have to make that space happen. So when you are able to push your belly out, pull down that diaphragm muscle, air comes in. And when you pull your belly in, you're going to force that air back out. So first we center on those biomechanics. We do the training sitting and standing because there's just slightly different musculature that has to be trained and strengthened. And we just look at this rate and we just get it nailed into place with 10 sessions sitting, 10 sessions standing. The sessions are 3.5 minutes each for sitting and then standing. So a total of 7 minutes and your training is done. So
Awesome.
then once you accomplish that goal, so we've got the biomechanics down, then we're going to work on consistency. So you just go, you do the same thing, you click your way in, and now we're going to see 2 graphs. One is for the rate and the other is for the consistency. So the consistency is just this. We don't want you to breathe 3 breaths a minute and then 7 breaths a minute and then 3 and then 7, because that does sound like it will still fit within the green range. We want you to breathe the same rate as closely as possible. So whether you're physically comfortable with a 5.5 or John is comfortable with a 6.25 breaths per minute, that's unique to your individual makeup, but you need to be consistent. This is an area where the awareness is really important because we are not aware of how inconsistent our breathing is. Because if our body's getting oxygen, we think we're doing fine. But for what we're talking about, engaging the vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system, we need consistency. The heart sets its rate in response to the breathing. So you will actually enable your heart to decrease its stress level if you can be consistent in your breathing. And that is a huge take home concept is the heart's going to do what the heart needs to do to survive. But if you want to do optimization and enable your heart's best performance, which then enables your body's best performance, guess what? It starts with your breathing. And this is that space again where I said we're so powerful because we can literally set that up. So that's the consistency in a nutshell. Once you get the consistency, you become more aware of it as you're doing the training because you see the screen, you're getting the feedback and you can adjust it. And so part of our program is also just asking you to learn the awareness to what you're doing.
So let's go back to this pacer. Let's talk about this diaphragmatic movement. We spent the first 20 minutes talking about the diaphragm. Now, how does the tech interact with the diaphragm?
Okay. So first off, we give you the pacer. The pacer is set at 6 breaths a minute. That's kind of a universal number that tends to be, what is the word for it? It's synergistic for the majority of people. Now, some are going to breathe slower, some faster, but so we have a setting there that's a little bit of a universal setting, 6 breaths per minute. That's for when you're beginning and you want to follow that pacer. So here's what Doc would be doing if he was a beginner. I would say when the ball's going up, push your belly out. And when the ball's coming down, pull your belly in. So this would be, if you were just doing a breathing pacer on a pacing app, you would get this same kind of thing. Now,
Exactly.
the difference with our program is what you're seeing on the screen is biofeedback. This is your belly moving. So if I was training you and I did not see this nice sine wave on the left side, I would be asking questions like, is your belt on tight enough? Where have you placed your belt? Because you should be seeing the belt biofeedback reflecting what your belly is doing. And that's how we assure that the diaphragm is being involved in your breathing. Otherwise, I have had somebody before who automatically assumed if we were going to do breathing training, the belt would be on her chest. So she had that thing wrapped around her chest and was trying to breathe. And I was like, what is going on? Had to get on the video monitor. And I was like, oh, you need to have the belt at your belly button because we want to engage the belly breathing. So this doc is showing us now what happens when you do not have training and where your belt's going all over the place. If you look at that, you have to ask the question, oh my gosh, what's my heart doing in response to that? Like that is not a predictable intake of oxygen. And in order to engage the vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system, we need the consistency. So that's why once we get that belly moving in that biomechanics stage, the next thing is to get consistency. So it's kind of like when you're a kid and you're swinging on a swing and you're the parent, you know, like when you're going to push that swing, you know, because it's coming back. It's like in a rhythm, like Doc's breathing is in a rhythm. So his heart knows when the next load of oxygen is going to come in. And so it sets its rate according to that supply. And the more consistent he can get in that breathing consistency graph, the more points he will earn. And again, we're trying to earn stars here because of course that is the most important thing is to get these stars. But no, the stars are simply representing that your body is understanding the task at hand and able to accomplish the task at hand. Now, sometimes there are reasons why this can't happen. We have clients that we have to make adjustments for, but for the vast majority, these first two items, most every human being can accomplish these first two things and learn the biomechanics followed by the consistency.
Perfect. And I think the key thing here also is that the pacer is not like all breathing apps have pacers, right? But the thing that sets Inner Armor apart here is the actual feedback on the stomach. So that red
Yes.
line for Doc is his actual movement of his stomach. And that's what we want to teach you. Are you correctly engaging that diaphragm muscle to correctly breathe? Because that's Pacer is the stop sign. That is the 75-mile-an-hour stop
Mhm.
sign that is just going to be there, but it has no indication of what actually you are doing in your body. And that's the same for these other breathing apps and things. So that's what this great screen is going to teach you guys. And Doc, you're an excellent breather. You have many years of practice. And so I think we can move to the Netflix or the streaming part next. But wanted to just show you guys kind of and go back to that to say these are the training screens where you see the feedback. You learn over time. You have to get 20 stars, right? So 10 sitting and 10 standing in order to proceed. So we don't want you to do this once or twice. This is a practice that you'll learn over a couple weeks. And then once you complete that, you move to the next level, which is a practice level. And in this, we're going to show you a new technology that's probably never been, that you've probably never seen before. This is a pretty innovative approach where we are going to distract you. We're going to take some of the feedback away from you, and we're going to put another type of feedback in place. And so instead of visual feedback, where you were seeing the biofeedback, now we're going to introduce an auditory feedback piece.
And let me clarify, you probably observed that there were many times that I wasn't actually following the pacer. I don't need the pacer anymore. So like, or when we first start, a lot of people like to hang on to that thing. It's like their training wheels. But I know that I need to be within a certain rhythm, and the pacer works to kind of get started. But I've found that perfect spot for me, which is now slightly different than the pacer. But just so you know that that's there. And then that's gone. That's gone. We don't have the pacer anymore. And what we're doing here is in the technical kind of biofeedback space. If you take somebody that's in a clinical situation, which I've worked with a lot of people with severe anxiety, PTSD, major phobias, is you first teach them what's called in the chair. So they're in the office, you're working on the breathing, and they're learning that technique. But if you just left them in the chair, right, and they have this fear of elevators, they might still be standing outside of elevators and using the stairs to get to the 8th floor, right? So what I then do in the clinical sense is I would take that breathing to the elevator, and we would start doing that breathing and start working on that breathing at the elevator so we could keep the nervous system calm and actually have them ride the elevator while we're calming the nervous system, activating the vagus nerve. Well, that's in the chair versus out of the chair. So what we've done is taken those clinical techniques and we've applied that to a peak performance program that systematically moves you from in the chair to out of the chair. And so this is the first phase, which we call practice. The next phase is called game time. But now is starting to teach you, okay, I'm not going to show you the training wheels anymore. I'm not even going to show you the visual up and down. You've learned it, but I will give you feedback when you don't meet criteria. So when you're not meeting criteria, I'm going to let you know that. I'm just not going to show you the pacer or your actual breath all the time. So we're now going to go to a biofeedback mode that a stimulus is given whenever you're in threshold, and then the stimulus is taken away when you're out of threshold. Okay?
You can download the Inner Armor app on your phone, Android, iOS, or your Mac. And once you get to this level of training, this technology integrates with anything on your device. So you can use any Netflix, Amazon, Spotify, Apple Music, any type of streaming platform that plays music or sound to be your feedback. So he has set his volume, and when he is breathing between 3 and 7 breaths per minute, and he's consistently breathing that way, the volume on the streaming that he's listening to will play. And when he starts breathing too quickly, like faster than 7 breaths a minute, or too slowly, or that breath starts to become inconsistent, the volume will go away. So now he knows that he's not breathing correctly. He's not practicing the right breathing pattern. So that is the way that we are teaching you guys to integrate and practice this training, where you're no longer seeing the feedback, but you can still hear whether or not you're breathing in the correct diaphragmatic way. So it's pretty unique technology. We'll have to post a video online where we can get the sound to play and kind of show, but that is inner armor core. And that vision, that program continues. So you have to get stars and you have to meet the threshold for a certain period of time during that session. And then if you do that, you get a star, and then you move to the next level, which tightens the parameters a little further. And then the last level, game time, which Dr. Royer mentioned, we take away all feedback. You're still wearing the breathing belt, but you're not going to receive the feedback during the session. But we still want you to breathe in the slow diaphragmatic way, and only afterwards do we tell you if you achieve the goal. And Doc, maybe quickly you can just kind of hit on why are we doing that, and maybe just close the loop with that in the chair, out of the chair for users.
Of course. So I just learned something. Okay. As we were doing it, I had it set to the music, a YouTube, some country music, right? Which was going in and out. But guess what else was going in and out? Was your voice. So I was literally my breath was controlling whether I could hear you or not. And I'm like, what's John saying right now? So I had to like breathe really slow. And then all of a sudden I could hear you. And then I got distracted and I stopped breathing correctly. And then your voice completely went away. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So it was really quite fascinating, because we were going to try to play the music, but I can see that the streaming that we're using right here is setting the audio to our voice, which I literally was controlling with my breath. But the applications are huge. Like, you can take your breathing belt out onto the field and practice your penalty kicks and have a Bluetooth speaker playing music. It's playing. As you're approaching to come up, all of a sudden it stops. Well, what do you know? Is I'm not activating the vagus nerve. I'm not diaphragmatically breathing correctly. I've got my system more worked up. I need to bring it back calm again. You step back, get that breath, the music comes on. You now confidently that you are in that perfect sweet spot to do that penalty kick, or to do the serve, or to do the putt. So as this program walks you through, during practice, we will cut the music in and out. Just like I was talking about, like, let's say I'm practicing penalty kicks. I can hear the music going in and out. That's classic biofeedback with audio or video. I could be watching game film. I could be doing whatever and turn it on and off. But now I want you to go out there, and I'm not going to give you any music feedback, but I'm still going to be recording physiological responses for 5 minute, 10 minute, 20 minute, 30 minute. And we're going to see in your awareness, it's game time now. Like, I'm not out here with my Bluetooth speaker, my phone, my bell. I'm out here playing. So what is the closest we can get to that? In game time, we're going to measure it all, but we're not going to give you any feedback. And at the end, so we're going to increase latency. That's the technical term for that in biofeedback. Is latency is time period. So in order to learn any skill, you need very short latency. Like, when I'm not balanced on my bike, I need to fall over. That's short latency, okay? But then over time, we can increase that latency so that that becomes more habitual inside of you, not just an initial skill. So in the chair, no latency. You can see it instantaneously. With the music, very little latency or time period. Now I'm going to say, pull off the feedback mechanisms, but use your brain, not the iPhone, not the computer, not actually the breathing belt, to keep you in that state. And then after the 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I can look and see, sure enough, I stayed in threshold 90% of the time, 95. So that's game time. There's nothing out there that I've ever seen. Even this belt we had to create, because it's so crazy how many other more sophisticated things out there, but nobody's like focusing on the main thing. And then not only that measurement, but this systematic biofeedback mechanism that gets you from in the chair, tight latency, to out of the chair, long latency. So I can go 4/4, I can go 2 hours, I can go 18 holes, whatever, and still maintain that skill. Not something I left in the chair, but something I take with me.
I think
Awesome.
maybe another application that might just broaden people's understanding is like take this to the boardroom. Like, could you do your breathing throughout a board meeting? And where would that put you as far as ability to hear what people are saying, ability to make a excellent response? Like I would say to myself, I'm going to do the game time stuff, the game time training. I'm going to try to do my emails while I'm wearing that belt, and I'm going to see if I can even do it for 5 minutes without dropping off. Like that's how distracted I can be or lose my awareness of what I'm doing if I see like a stressful email. But learning to be able to do my day-to-day functions and see like how much better did that go when I was able to stay in a good breathing state and use the information. That's the thing, is the feedback is so impressive that you can see like, oh, of course I was like sweating after that meeting and there was really no need to be sweating. I'm in an air conditioned house, but it was because I let my autonomic nervous system just go into flight. And it's so crazy to think like I actually have control of that to a degree. Like I can be making a difference if I just have this tool and I decide to use it at the right time. So that's I love the training for the way that it takes you from that immediate feedback to this is a little scary, like taking the training wheels off, but I do know what I'm supposed to try to do and let me just try to do it and see how I do. And then just continue to grow with the information.
Awesome. I think so. We developed this program for everyone. This is for those executives in the boardroom. This is for the athletes. We're kicking off a program actually with third graders over in California, and we're going to teach them how to do this type of breathing so they can better focus and manage their emotions and get better sleep and balance that nervous system. So this program is for everyone, and we've priced it and built it in a way that it's very accessible for people to join, and we want people to join. Our goal is to help more people learn these techniques. We want to teach you and give you that feedback so that you can learn this technique to help live a better life. And so if you're interested in learning more about Inner Armor Core or Inner Armor at all, you can reach out to myself to get started, or you can hit us up on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever. But we'd love to talk to you. We'd love to get yourself started in the program, your team, your family, whoever would be interested, so that we can teach you these skills. It's a 4 to 6 month program, and every training exercise is 5 to 7 minutes. So we're asking for 5 to 7 minutes a day, probably about 35 to 40 minutes a week to effectively learn this over 4 to 6 months. And that's all it takes to learn these simple skills. So we appreciate those who joined live. We really thank you guys for listening to us. And we're going to post this recording and send it out to people as well. And so thank you so much, Doc. And thank you, Amy, for your time. And anything you guys would like to say as we close up today?
Just thanks for having us and letting us share what we're excited about. When we were young, we started our business. Our tagline was change your brain, change your life, change your world. And now we know even better that it should have started with change your breath. And then the rest would follow. So we're like, this is our stuff. We love this and we want it for more people. So thanks for letting us share.
Yeah, and I would say we've been doing this for 35 years. And this last 18 months with the technology, with the software, with the advancements has completely changed everything. And there's nothing like it on the planet. I am so excited about how with this, we're able to take years and years and years of work that were really only for certain people and now get it to the world.
This training and technology shouldn't be just for people who can afford it. It should be for everyone. And then we really want everyone to learn to forge their own inner armor through these tools and techniques. So thank you, Doc and Amy, for your mission. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll catch you guys later and have a great day. Take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Forge your inner armor